Hi, and welcome to On the Spot. My name is Ronnie Wiley. To my left is Betsy Ross. We're going to be catching up with Betsy Ross. First time you've been on the show since 2014. You were actually my second guest ever.
Wow, I'm honored.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
first time having you back in all this time. So, and you're still doing wonderful things.
Keeping busy.
Big things, yeah.
Keeping busy.
And we're talking before we went on the air. You got a big thing coming up in Cincinnati that which I didn't know this, but you do more than sports with your game day. Promotion,
Game Day Communications.
Yes, yeah.
Is the full name.
Yeah.
We do probably about half of what we do has something to do with sports. I mean, that's really how we started out in the business 21 years ago, is doing mostly sports. Flying Pig Marathon, we've worked with the Reds and the Bengals and their charities. Right now we're working with the Joe Burrow Foundation.
Oh, wow.
He's such a terrific guy, and his parents run the foundation, and they're just wonderful to work with.
How do you get involved in that?
Just like everything else, a friend of a friend, and somebody called and, hey, can you help us? So much of what this is, as you know, so much of business is who knows your work and who has seen your work or who has worked with you. And so they will recommend you to somebody else. So we got that, and we're just so thankful to be able to do that. But we're working with Taylor Swift concert.
That's the big
doing the media for the Taylor Swift concert coming up in Cincinnati, and so there's a lot going on in Cincinnati. We always said that it's a great time to be a sports fan right now in Cincinnati because things are cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. With the Bengals and the Reds surprising with that 12-game winning streak, which sold out. Which was the first time since I guess when they retired Pete's number back in '16, which was about the same time. I think it was 2016. But Taylor Swift, you're doing media for that. What does that encompass when you do media for somebody like her? Well,
and again, going back to, so many of our references come from people that we have worked with or people who know our work. And every year we work with the Bengals and Paul Brown / Paycor Stadium.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's so weird to say now.
I know. We work with them on the Cincinnati Music Festival, and that's always the third weekend in July. And so we have worked on the media part on that forever, just getting credentials, making sure people get seated where they're supposed to get seated, things like that. So the Bengals called us up a month or so ago and said, can you help us also with the media for Taylor Swift? And of course, this thing is a juggernaut. This thing is like its own corporation. I mean, not just her, but the tour. It's massive. But they needed basically a go-between between the Bengals, the stadium, and Taylor Swift's people. So we're helping with the credentialing. We'll be babysitting the media on Friday and Saturday nights. As you can imagine, it's very limited. And if you've shot any kind of a concert or know of that, usually it's 3 songs and you're out. You get to shoot 3 songs and you're out. So it's the same way with Taylor Swift concert.
Do they get to pick the songs do they know the set list part?
First 3 songs and you're out.
Oh, it's the first 3.
It's the first 3.
Wow. I didn't know if they rotated in and out.
No.
Wow.
It's a very small, from what we understand, it's a very small media pit, photo pit. All photos, no video allowed in the pit. And then you get your first 3 songs and then you're out.
Isn't that wild when you say no video, but then you got everybody with their cameras?
Everybody's with their cameras, and it's not that you won't be able to take video because, as you said, everybody is going to have their cameras, but the professional cameras.
So. Talking about that, I remember back in the day, it was you just could not record anything in the incident with Axl Rose with the guy with the camera. Now it's encouraged to. Put that on YouTube so people can see.
Remember the Grateful Dead? They wanted you.
That's right.
To tape their concerts. I mean, they didn't care if it was a bootleg or not. They wanted you to tape their concerts.
They were way ahead of. Some of the, you look back at things that they did. It's like, well, they were way ahead of time. So Taylor Swift, is that the first time you guys have done any music or something that big that's outside of the sports realm?
That big, probably yes. The Cincinnati Music Festival is one of the largest tourism events that Cincinnati has, and so that's pretty big. We work with the Chamber, Cincinnati Chamber, on Taste of Cincinnati and Oktoberfest, and that brings in 500,000 people. Wow. So there have been, similar ones. Probably the biggest one sports related, we've done two. We've done the PR for the All-Star game, MLB All-Star game that came in 15. We were the local PR company for that. And then when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, we
Should have
had
been last year.
We could do a whole show on that.
Yeah, I know.
But we had you could almost say a pop-up media center in LA for both the local media, Cincinnati media that was out there, and also the LA media, so they could interview. We had the mayor come in, and we had the governor come in, and we had some of the dignitaries from Cincinnati come in that people get interviews with, just as background, because you've got a week of Super Bowl coverage, and there's only so many times you're going to see the team, which isn't a lot that week. So we had a media center there in LA, so people could talk to people from Cincinnati and get the Cincinnati point of view of the game.
So when you were out there, and again, you don't see the players that much, but you did see a lot of your colleagues from Cincinnati or other people that you may have worked with from ESPN. How is it catching up with when you catch up with people that you hadn't worked with in a while, and they're in different stations or different?
It's always fun. I mean, it's a very small fraternity of those in the media, and so we always joke there's only 100 of us in the business, and we just keep moving jobs. We just switch jobs all the time. But
it's like in the radio, they always say there's like in life, there's 6 degrees of separation. And in radio, I think there's one. Television, there's like one.
There really is.
Yeah, somebody. I worked with them, and
it's always great to see somebody I worked with at ESPN. Whether they're still there or somewhere else. And as you know, you always have tales.
Right. Yeah.
Tales in media. You always have stories about what's gone on, how the business has changed, and it's changed. Dramatically over the last few years. So it's a lot of fun.
That's what keeps you young.
Yeah.
It keeps you fresh, keeps you going. Things evolve, you evolve with it. Again, you're from Connersville, Indiana. I mean, right here in Connersville, Indiana. Betsy Ross graduated not on the Hill.
Not on the Hill.
Yeah. You graduated, and it's not even here anymore. How'd that make you feel when they tore down your old high school?
Well, I think that we were so excited to see the new building.
Yeah.
We all were. And that's when, as you know, the high school was, it was huge.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I think there were 1,700 kids in my freshman year when I went to Connersville High School. Yeah. And so, it's
just... And you came from a one-room.
And I came from a one-room schoolhouse. So, that was culture shock, let me tell you. But, it was just so exciting to have that kind of facility for Connersville, for the kids in Connersville. The Spartan Bowl is always going to be the Spartan Bowl. It's always going to be there. And I have talked when, we've had meetings and we've talked to some of the people here in town. The foresight that they had to build the Spartan Bowl 60 years ago.
I know.
Are you kidding me? And that thing is as relevant today as when they built it. And I go to some of the other gyms, covering basketball. I was just telling somebody the other day, I walk into some of the gyms in Cincinnati and I go,
what is it?
This is like our practice gym. Are you kidding me? It really is.
It's like the arena.
Think of the foresight that they had when they built the Spartan Bowl. That's why we got to host the regional and the sectional for so many years
until they Chrysler Fieldhouse or Newcastle Fieldhouse came out. Yeah.
What they say, 7 of the 10 largest high school arenas here in Indiana.
Yeah, and the Spartan Bowl was one of the.
You just look at that facility and said, this thing is from the 50s. Are you kidding me?
I know.
And that's amazing.
Well, you talk about that. I've had lots of friends because I moved here in '87, my junior year of high school, and it was a big high school, but it was one floor huge. I'd never had a campus like that.
Yeah.
I thought, what do you mean I got to walk outside to go to another room? What is this? It's raining. I mean, so that was new. That was neat. Then they had a media thing. It was for these people that wear cowboy boots on purpose, they wore T-shirts. I mean, why would you wear a T-shirt? They really were ahead of, looking back, they were kind of ahead of where I came from in West Carrollton, which was south of Dayton, Ohio. And I look back at that now and think, geez, it was a culture shock to me. But when I bring my friends over to go to the Spartan Bowl, they're like, Man, this is incredible.
I know, it's just an
The
amazing
electricity.
facility. And when they switched out the floor a couple of years ago, and it was just so fascinating to see those pictures on, you know, they're digging up the floor. I mean, that, you know, that space hadn't been seen for 60 years.
Right,
but
I know.
so much of a town, a city's identity goes right around their high school.
Right.
Goes right, you know, I
Right.
mean, you know, we have so much pride in, you know, the basketball team and all that. You talk about going out to the hill. You know, Joe Glowacki started that television program there, and that was ahead of its time. I mean, and that's really how I got into television, because I was student teaching. It was my senior year in college, and, you know, I was student teaching. We were in quarters then. And so they said, okay, usually they let you go back to your high school, you know, for your last quarter student teaching. They said, well, we've got 2 classes of journalism, which was my major, 2 classes of journalism and 2 classes of English that you can student teach. And I said, just between you and me, I'm never going to teach English, so what else you got? He said, well, we got a radio and television class. You want to teach that? I said, sure. How hard can it be? You know, so I walk in, and poor Mr. Glowacki, you know, here I am going, hey, you know, and so I basically learned everything like the day before I had to teach it.
Wow.
And I learned with these kids. I mean, we all went out and we shot video, and then I'd go back and I'd help them edit, and I'd watch, and then we'd write scripts, and then they would anchor it. And I mean, I learned right along with those kids, and we get, you know, I'm having a blast.
And you're still a kid, basically.
Yeah, I was still in college.
Yeah.
And I am having a blast, and I'm going, great. It's my last quarter of my senior year in college, and I finally find something that really excites me. And so, you know, that's really when I had in the back of my mind, okay, I'm going to go into television. So I went back to school and got my master's, and it was in communication arts, and I got a lot more experience in TV.
Awesome.
And so, I mean, it's because of the program here and Joe Glowacki's foresight to have that program that I got into it.
Yeah, because there's, I mean, I don't know how many there is in the country now, but I think we were one of the first, if not the first.
Ones, absolutely.
Yeah,
But
so many first here in Connersville.
yeah, and you talk about, I went to Milan this past weekend. I did like the Hoosier tour.
Oh yeah.
We drove up to Knightstown to go to the Hoosier Gym, where they shot the movie.
Right.
You know, you get to walk in, you can shoot hoops right there on the floor and things like that.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it's really cool. And then we drove down to Milan to go to the museum there for the Milan 54. And, I mean, this has been 60 years. They're going to have their 60th.
That's right.
They're going to have their 60th anniversary next year. And the town still has...
Yeah, 70,
70th.
50. Wow.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's so much surrounding that town and its high school, even though it's been since 1954 since that happened.
Yeah, so much pride still with that. Yeah.
Think about that.
Well, when you talk about that, I mean, the Spartan Bowl was around that time too, right? So, and we still have so much pride in that.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that's an afterthought.
Yeah, like mid-50s, late 50s, because when they played Crispus Attucks, which was 55, 56, they still had the plywood jungle.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, they still had the plywood jungle. They didn't have the new place yet.
Yeah.
So
I just know that when we have gone to other places to play, especially the Indianapolis, and you think it'd be, you know, even though some of their gyms are now bigger than ours, they're not as intimate, and their pregame is terrible. They don't have what we have. It's like you would think that people would want to adopt that we have, and we
they have the Spartan
that.
coming out. Are you kidding me? That is so cool.
Yeah, I
that
love
is the coolest.
Yeah. And so, I tell you, some of those kids really get into it. You're like, I tell you, Logan Gee's team was one of the best ever. I mean, that kid came out, and he walked right over to us to talk to us on the air. It was like awesome. We love that kid. It was like they're the best one ever.
I mean, all you need is a horse, but you know.
They
probably wouldn't like that.
Yeah, maybe we try to get that going this year for the new coach's first year. So again, from Connersville, Indiana, you're now going to be doing the media for Taylor Swift, but. And we talked about this. We've talked about this before. You met someone during your career in Cincinnati that really made a nice impression and was one of the smartest people I ever met, and that was Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he recently passed away. Tell us about Jerry.
Well, you know, if you took Jerry at what you saw
Yeah.
with his show,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd roll your eyes.
Right.
You'd say, are you kidding me? I was very fortunate to know Jerry and to be a colleague of his at Channel 5 in Cincinnati. He was anchoring when I was anchoring. We anchored together many a time. And he was the smartest person I've ever known. And he has such a story of his own life.
Right.
I mean, his parents escaped Nazi Germany. They basically split up. Mom took the kids this away. Dad went that away. They met in London. He was born in London.
Yeah.
When he was 5 years old, they came to the United States, and he grew up in New York. He went to law school. He came to Cincinnati in the middle of the riots, got into politics. He was such a passionate person
Right.
for the underdog, for the underserved.
Right.
And I said when we were talking about him on Fox 19, I said he was as comfortable at a fundraiser in Indian Hill, which
Right,
has all
yeah.
the money in the world. He was as comfortable there as he was going into an inner city park and talking to the people there. I mean, he truly saw what was needed, and he truly tried to help the underprivileged. He worked for a long time on Bobby Kennedy's
Yeah.
presidential campaign. And I mean, he was smart. He knew what he was doing. His daughter is challenged.
Yeah.
And he always said, all I want to do is make enough money so that she can be taken care of.
Yeah.
And he did.
And he did.
I mean, that was his goal. If you saw him on Dancing with the Stars, the last time that he danced, he went over and embraced Katie, his daughter, because he wanted to go on Dancing with the Stars so he could dance at her wedding, and she was there for his last dance, and all he wanted to do was make enough money, take care of her, and he absolutely did that.
Good for him.
Yeah.
You told me a story about him going under disguise to homeless.
Yeah. He, that's always a series that local news does, is homeless and all that stuff. And he said, well, I'm not going to know about it unless I do it. And so for 3 or 4 days, he went undercover and had an old hat and old clothes, and he spent a couple of 3 nights on the streets. And there was this one night, he was in the shelter, and the shelter had Channel 5 News on.
Yeah.
And the guy sitting next to Jerry goes, well, Springer's gone again. He must be down in Florida on vacation. He's not on the news again tonight. Well, of course,
He's
he
right
was
next
sitting
to
right
him.
there.
Yeah.
But he really came back with some insightful stories about the homeless and the challenges and things like that. And it would be something that you would never get unless you were right there. And he was.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
That's going into it. I remember, and I told you this before, I remember distinctly always watching his commentary at the end of the night, which always was very insightful, was very, very good. I always thought it was better than Andy Rooney's. I just always enjoyed his take care of yourself and each other was one of the, it was a great catchphrase.
Yeah.
And you said that he always agonized over that. He wanted to make that perfect.
He worked so hard on that. Every night he would come back from our dinner break between the 6 and 11 o'clock news. He would come back after dinner break and just write and rewrite and rewrite. And one of my friends always would help him write it and rewrite it. And they would go over it and go over it. And she would help work on it. And one night Suzanne said, Jerry, I don't make enough money to do this.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, you're right. So he takes out his checkbook, starts writing a check, and he goes, oh, my check's no good.
I remember that.
That's a Jerry Spray for another time.
Yeah, that's another time. But I know
so
what you're talking about.
He tears up the check.
What a great sense of humor.
Yeah, he tears up the check. He takes his business card, he flips it over and says, I owe Suzanne $1 million, and gives it to her. And Suzanne was telling me this later on. I go, you could have cashed that in. Yeah. She goes, no, what I did was when he left Cincinnati to go to Chicago to continue his talk show.
Because it started in Cincinnati, didn't it? Yeah.
Started in Cincinnati. And he said, when he left for Chicago, said, I had it framed and I gave it back to him. I go, oh, Suzanne, you could have cashed that in for $1 million. But
oh, yeah,
she didn't.
yeah,
But yeah,
taken
he
out
would
to
work
lunch.
so hard on it because he knew that it was something that people would tune in to watch.
Right, yeah.
And he always tried to make sure that it was relevant
Right.
and it resonated
Yeah.
with people because he knew that a lot of people would stick around until that time of the newscast to watch it.
There was no partisan. There was no. Man, that guy's definitely liberal. That guy's definitely conservative. There was nothing. It was down the middle. It was human.
Yeah, that's
his
very.
were human.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
It was human. Now everybody knew that he was a
I
liberal.
didn't know that at the time.
Well,
I didn't know at the time.
well, because
I was still young.
and
Yeah.
he knew that you have a responsibility when you're in a newscast
Right, yeah.
to not be liberal or conservative,
Right.
to play it down the road.
Right.
You know, at least the news used to be
Right,
that
yeah.
way.
Yeah, that's right,
Again,
yeah.
that's another topic for
Yeah,
another
yeah,
day.
yeah.
But you know, when you're doing news, you don't want to lean right or left. You want to keep in the middle, and that's what he did. Even though, you know, I mean, it was no secret what his politics were, but he really tried to make sure that it was human. That's a really good description of what he did.
Yeah, I loved it. You, again, one of the things I mentioned in the magazine was that you have done so much in your career and your life, and you've never forgot Connersville. You can't.
Well, because Connersville hasn't forgotten about me.
Yeah,
and,
right,
And
yeah.
I'm so blessed and so thankful for that. I mean, Connersville is home. Connersville will always be home. We still have the house here in Alpine. You know, my mower broke, so you know it's a little ragged right now. So
The last time I saw you was a couple of weeks ago, and it was like 95, and I'm going to go cut the grass. I'm like, Betsy, it's 95.
It didn't.
You're going to be a charcoal briquette when you're
It
done.
doesn't matter, yeah. But then my mower broke, so there you go. I think somebody was trying to tell me don't mow when it's 95.
Yeah. Don't do it when it's 95 degrees. So you know, again, we could. There's so much that you have done in your career. One of the things that stood out to me that we talked about last time I saw you was that, and I didn't know this, but you were on the air when 9/11 happened on ESPN.
Yeah.
And that had to be an emotional day for anybody who was on the air.
Well, it was, and it was one of these things that I was on ESPN News, and we had an afternoon shift from 1 to 4.
Yeah.
And so whoever anchored 1 to 4, they would come in about 8 o'clock just to start getting ready for the newscast. And we're in the newsroom. ESPN has a newsroom.
Right.
We were in the newsroom, and everybody has like a little monitor on their desk. And I'm watching the Today Show, and all of a sudden, you know, there's the one plane that goes into the World Trade Center. And I remember that it was a crystal blue day. It was clear as a bell, because I always flew back. That was like my Tuesday afternoon. Then I'd fly back home, and I would be home Wednesday and Thursday. So I always check the weather on Tuesday. I go, oh, good, the weather is good. I can fly back.
Yeah.
And so, in typical newsroom bad humor, we go, can't you see that building in front of you? Are you kidding me?
I think everybody thought that, like, what's that guy's?
Yeah, and everybody was saying, oh, it was a small plane, this and that and the other. And this went for like 15 or 20 minutes. And then when the second one, then all of a sudden, I remember this. Everybody looked at each other in the newsroom. And all of a sudden you saw the brass from upstairs. They came running downstairs, and they're looking at each other. And I was the only anchor in the building because, again, you know, there wasn't a broadcast until 1 in the afternoon. I was the only anchor in the building. And so they
That's
said,
right, you guys were looping the whole,
And so they said, get on the set. So I went straight through from 9 in the morning until 4. Because nobody else was scheduled until 4 o'clock, and it was one of the most surreal days in my broadcast. It was one of these things that, because that was when owned by Disney, ABC, and so basically we just had to go on the air, and this was on all platforms, international.
Right.
And I would cut in every half hour and say, yes, we know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yes, there's been an apparent terrorist attack on the United States. And it was one of these things I couldn't believe I was saying those words.
Right, yeah.
An apparent terrorist attack on the United States. And, you know, you just have to catch your breath. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Right.
But we say, you know, go to your local ABC affiliate, you know, watch the news there and this and that and the other. So like every half hour I would come out with that because that's all we knew.
Right, yeah.
And then later on in the day, then Major League Baseball had a news conference
yeah.
and we could take that. You know, they were canceling. NFL had a
yeah.
news conference
Yeah.
that they were canceling. So we had other elements,
Right.
sports related,
Right.
that we could go to and talk about. But, you know, we're just sitting there and watching Peter Jennings, and then there go the towers, and you're going, are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just one of these surreal days, and they're bringing me coffee, and they're
yeah.
bringing me water. I said,
Yeah.
you need anything? I said, no, I'm fine. And, you know, they would have updates. Of course, I had my computer. But I was on the air until 4 that afternoon, and it was
Wow.
just one of the more bizarre, surreal
Yeah.
days in my broadcast. And I was on the air when the Challenger blew up.
Oh, wow. The
at
one
Channel
in 86 or the
yes,
one that was, okay, yeah. Yeah, I remember that happened,
I
yeah.
was on the air when the Challenger blew up, and you know, we were CBS affiliate then, and CBS, Dan Rather came in like a half hour later, but I mean, this was like all afternoon. You had to give whatever updates you had.
Yeah.
With whatever information you had, and you know, and when it comes to something like that, information just comes out and drips and
Right,
drabs,
yeah,
and you have
right.
to watch what you say because you can't
Right.
speculate.
Right, sure.
You can't, you know, because numbers were going
Right,
wild that
right,
day,
yeah.
and so you couldn't speculate. You had to stick with the facts. You had to
Yeah.
go with what was confirmed, and it was a surreal day. I mean, it was
Talk
one
about
of
a
these
crystal
things.
clear day. That was too on 86. Of course, down there in Florida, it had to be. But I remember that day specifically. It was very cold, and very clear sky.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
clear blue sky when
yeah.
they took off.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy. And I just now when you were doing the news on 9/11, were you doing all 9/11 coverage, or were you doing the replays from the night before?
No,
You doing another?
it was all 9/11. Well, I take that back. Back then, a lot of times, like, you know, ESPN, they would
Yeah.
have like exercise shows.
Oh, okay. yeah.
And especially international ESPN, they would have a tractor pull on, or they would have, you know, whatever their pre-programmed programming was. Yes, so they did do that.
Yeah.
So they kept that on. But
You
then
would
when
jump
I
in
came
and-
in, I said, yes, I
We
know
know
that we're
it's going-
showing
yeah.
an exercise show right
Yeah,
now. I
yeah.
know that. However, we do know what's
Yeah.
going on, and we encourage
'Cause
you
you
to
go
go to
local, yeah,
So
yeah.
so they had whatever programming was up.
Right.
But then I would come in and say, you know, please go to your local ABC affiliate.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
It was totally surrealist.
You have lived the life, Betsy Ross. Yeah, and it all started right here in Connersville, Indiana. And she got her education start in a one-room classroom
Yeah.
in
Warren
Alpine, right?
Schoolhouse.
It was in
Yeah.
Alpine?
The first one was in Nulltown.
Oh, Nulltown. Yeah.
Yeah, that schoolhouse doesn't exist anymore. And then the second was Garrison Creek,
Garrison
and it's still up. It's a church now,
Oh, okay.
but the one-room schoolhouse in Garrison Creek's still there. So, and I know I would not have been able to do anything that I have without my education. So, you know,
Get your education.
Get your
kids.
education.
Got to get that education. Betsy Ross, we can talk for another hour.
I know.
you
I
were
know we
just,
could.
Yeah, you were just a joy to
Thank you so much.
know. It's a pleasure to know you.
Thank you.
We'll catch up with you later, and we'll catch up with you next month on The Spot.